for another episode. I'm your podcast host, Rameez Kaleem, founder and CEO of 3R Strategy. I'm joined today by Rebecca Hogan, an experienced HR director with experience of working across multiple countries. Most recently, you have been working in the investment and renewable energy sector. Today, we'll be talking about talent management in the renewable energy sector and how to develop organizational values. Rebecca, welcome to A Case of the Mondays.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So, I know that you've been in your role for a while now, working in the renewable energy sector. So I think it's around 8 years.
hmm
So what would you say that you're most proud of?
Yes, 8 years. They say time goes quickly when you're having fun, don't they? So it's been a fantastic ride so far. When I joined Cubico, we were, I think, a little over 100 employees in 4 different countries. And we are now well over 500 colleagues in 9 different countries. And my role, the opportunity was very much to build out the people proposition. So soup to nuts. So that includes everything from HR systems and frameworks through to a well-being proposition, of which ours has won some awards. So I am proud of that. But even more recently, things like trying to choose charities to offer employee volunteering opportunities for. So you've really been able to touch and influence the people experience in every dynamic. But I think what's actually really most special is that the people that we've hired, unfortunately, a lot of them are still here. So we've got colleagues that are 8, 9, 10 years in tenure. And when I go traveling, of which I am very thankful that I can do, I go and visit our offices around the world. When you go and have those conversations, you meet people sometimes for the first time, sometimes for the fourth, the fifth, the sixth time. It doesn't matter how long they've been there, there's still very much a sense of Cubico. So for me, I think what's most special, what I'm really quite proud of, is we've hired some fantastic people, we've retained some fantastic people, and we've done all of that still with a sense of Cubico. The people we've hired are still very much Cubico values. They have a Cubico spirit, a collaboration that spans across territories and geographies. So for me, I think that's what I'm most proud of.
Okay, that's great because, I think one of the challenges a lot of HR people face is when you're really scaling up and growing in size, is how do you maintain that culture?
hmm
Because as a small organization, and there's like we're small, there's 9 of us, and it's much easier to maintain that culture because you know everyone personally. But as you grow as an organization, now it's not just down to you. You have all your managers and some employees that you probably never speak to, and that's the challenge. So if you think about that and the fact that you scaled up and grown so much, what do you think would be the secret to that success of maintaining that organizational culture? And when you talk about, your organizational values and everything, do you think there's one or two things you can point at to say that that really helped?
There's certainly things I think that have helped. I don't think I've got a silver bullet. It does take a lot of energy and a continued effort on it. I think being able to really define your values, I think that's really important. And we did that exercise about 7 years ago now. And we did that originally with the first cohort of what I call our values champions. And I think that role of our value champions, so it's a global employee resource group, very much representative across our offices. And every single year, they are tasked with trying to have new initiatives, new ideas to bring our values to life in the organization. Or sometimes just highlighting where we have lived our values. So through creative thinking and value creation, or through our health and safety practices, for example, with a real sense of integrity. So, we have those very live examples throughout the organization, and that accumulates with our year-end values awards, which is an opportunity for all of our colleagues to be able to nominate people that have lived the values. And that is sponsored by our exec team. So I think the idea that you have values that are kept alive in the organization by colleagues, but also values that are sponsored and owned by your exec team, I think that's really important, and that's quite visible in our organization as well. So I think those are two things that I think have helped. share the understanding of what Cubico's values are, which is really a blueprint for the behaviours that we expect of each other. And of course, from a hiring perspective, we also have an in-house hiring team, and that team is very well versed in what we look for in terms of what makes Cubico special, what we need in terms of our, not just our skills and capabilities, but the behaviours that we expect and the people that we expect and how they work. So I think those actually three things then are probably some of the reasons that we've been able to keep that alive.
So you talked about the importance of having values, and I definitely see that as well, because we work on a lot of reward projects, and often you want to try
Mm.
and link reward or things like performance management back to the values. And I set up the company around 10 years ago, and the initial process was me in a workshop with a branding agency, and we thought about, okay, what are the values that are important to me? And so from day one I had the values of the organization, and then it was around a few years ago, there was, now we've got a team and there's 9 of us, and we all sat down for a couple of hours, said, okay, now we need to refresh our values. Let's think about, as a team, what are the values that are important to us. And so we did that collectively, everyone in the company. And it's easy. Well, it's easier when there's, 9 of us. Given your size, I'm keen to understand how big were you in terms of headcount when you developed your values, and what was your process? Because you can't really get everyone sitting down in a room to say, okay, what is important to us. So what was your process in developing values internally?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, sometimes you can't have too many chefs in the kitchen. So
Mm.
we had to, at the time, we chose a route that we thought was the right one. So we really took a lot of our inaugural founders from the organization. So Cubico was spun out of Santander 10 years ago. And so we had a lot of our initial members of staff who have been there for the entirety of the journey at that juncture. So this was about 7 years ago. We asked that group, firstly, to share their reflections on, again, some of the things we're talking around, articulating what it is to work at Cubico, why is Cubico special, what do we need to be and do in the future in order to be successful. But we also expanded that out because what, again, we wanted to have is at least representation across the organization. So we wanted to ensure that we're asking people that, yes, had been part of the founding story of the organization, but those that we had hired that were attracted to that. So again, the questions to them is, what attracted you to the organization? What makes us different to where you've worked before? How do we rank against our competitors, for example? And so for us, it was just trying to inevitably trying to get as many voices that are representative across the organization as possible. And as I mentioned before, they effectively became our values champions. So that was step one, essentially, in trying to create a cohort of people that were representative and who were interested. While I think this is really important stuff, and you're saying it's important to you too, I appreciate sometimes for everyone that's not always the case, and that differs as well depending on priorities at the time and workload, etc. So we wanted people that were willing to spend some time thinking about this, reflecting on this, discussing it, and ideating around our values, around our culture, about how do we create symbols in the organizations, what stories do we associate it with it as well. So again, as you start to launch these things, how can you have something that kind of brings it to life in the organization and it becomes visible? So step one was really creating that team, that cohort, or inaugural values champions. And then it was exactly the exercise that you said that you went through, is trying to ask those questions and document all of the answers that are coming back from people in terms of those questions that we just started to talk about. So articulating what it is around Cubico's values, and also trying to capture not where we are necessarily just right now, but where we want to be as well. So I think the thing about values is you want them to be aspirational. You want them to, as much as you can, stand the test of time, something that you can have as your North Star effectively. So we tried to capture that in some of that feedback as well. And of course, inevitably that garnered a huge array of feedback. But interestingly, thematically, a lot of consistency in terms of what we're hearing back from people in terms of what they appreciated in the organization, what they felt we needed to hold on to as we grew, what made us unique, and what they look for in people in their team and in their colleagues. So having captured all of that, I mentioned before the importance of executive leadership and sponsorship. So we took all of that and we synthesized it as much as we could. And then essentially we needed a very creative leadership team, which thankfully we have, to be able to distill for them what they felt was the most important themes coming through from it. So for them, again, to be able to role model this, to champion it, and to take ownership of it. So for them, they distilled for them even further what was the most important values, essentially, and themes for them. And that's where we got our drive from. So for us, Cubico has drive values, that's diversity, respect, integrity, value creation, excellence, and drive itself. We're a very ambitious organization. We scale very quickly. And as I say, that was very much then finessed through the executive team, owned by the executive team, and then handed back out to the values champions, who have then had different iterations every year, but this group who are charged with bringing this to life, as well as obviously through the HR team, where that perforates into our job descriptions, all our online media in terms of from a people attraction perspective, our interviewing, our performance management, when we talk around behaviors and how people act with each other, and our recognition in our awards at the end of every year as well. So it's a shared task and a shared responsibility. But I think the biggest thing is to have as many representations heard, but ultimately you still need a process, a team to make that happen. And I think that's where you do unfortunately need to keep the group representative but as functional as possible, because otherwise it just becomes a lot of good conversation and you're not getting as many of those stories out in the organizations and a lot of those initiatives, and it does need to be something that is kept alive.
I mean, that's great to hear that you've not just developed those values, but integrated it into things like your performance management. And,
Yes.
I think in particular, recognition is a really powerful way of embedding values where, like you said, you share success stories. And when people see those behaviors being recognized, it reinforces them. And it's, often HR teams are struggling with budgets and saying, how do we reward this and that? But actually, a lot of recognition is non-monetary. It's about just celebrating those behaviors that we value.
Absolutely. I was on a call the other day with a cohort of HR leaders, and we all aligned that actually more recently we've all ended up in some ways going back to the everyday thank you or a simple thank
Mm,
you note, because that value never really deteriorates actually.
yeah. Let's look at your sector now. And,
Yes.
I think we've seen the renewable sector, it's been around for a long time now, but I guess I would say compared to a lot of other sectors, it's still growing,
Hmm.
evolving,
Yes.
and there might be a lot of new skills that are, coming into it as well. And so, uh, maybe I'm making an assumption, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I would guess that you're probably, given what we're seeing from Gen Z employees and what they value around purpose and making a difference, that you probably attract a lot of Gen Z candidates. Would you say that's accurate?
I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of good talent increasingly is looking for meaningful work, is looking for organizations that align with their values, their purpose. Um, And I think that does create opportunities and challenges for organizations. So I think for Cubico, we are fortunate that we work on the right side of history, that we are in clean energy, we are wanting to contribute and be part of a net zero world. And that does attract good talent, I say. And for us, that's step one, I think. I
Mm.
don't think that's enough to just have that as what your organization does. I think when you hire good talent with those expectations, that perforates across every way in which you do business. So, I find personally that when you hire people that have that strong sense of purpose that aligns with what the mission of the organization, their expectations transcend from not just creating clean energy, it's how you work throughout all of your supply chain. How are you treating your third parties? How are you treating your employees? Even in the office environment, are you using sustainable materials? Are you recycling, for example? So those expectations are quite high.
Mm.
And I think they're ever evolving actually as well with new technologies and the growth of feedback forums and ideation, so people can kind of hear and see what other organizations are doing and ask the same of you. But I think where the Gen Z opportunity is around early careers generally. So I think the particular challenge in our sector, so we hire a lot of engineers, um, and I think every organization wants to be as diverse as possible. I think the sector itself is not that diverse. You look at gender is the easiest one. It should be the easiest one. The UK in particular is 51% female. So you would hope that you can at least have gender parity in an organization. But even though there's 51% females in the UK, less than 20% of engineers are females. So hiring and retaining a diverse workforce generally is a challenge. So I think that's where a lot of HR or organizations look at early careers, so Gen Z, to be able to hire diverse talent, because it does get harder as you have more experienced hires. As we know, people fall out of the workforce for multiple reasons. So I think actually the biggest challenge is when you have your early careers opportunities, which typically is then hiring Gen Z. So you're looking at your internships, your graduates, your apprenticeships. Really, you're trying to maximize those opportunities in terms of the reach and the attraction that you have, because what you want to have is really that as your diversity pipeline. So you want to really capitalize on those opportunities and reach as many people, attract as many people, bring as many diverse talent and capabilities into the organization. And then, of course, you want to try and retain them as well. So I think that's where you really focus on Gen Z as opportunities. I think that's because you're hoping to try and use that as your diversity pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, but I can imagine that you probably have a lot of candidates applying for jobs when you advertise, because the research that I've seen is I would say there's three things in particular that Gen Z employees are looking for. One is, like you said, that sense of purpose, which you have with what you're doing as an organization. The second is identifying with the values of the organization, and you put a lot of emphasis on that. But the third thing, it's probably four actually. The third thing is a transparency. They're really looking for transparency, and we're seeing again very high numbers of candidates that are actually not applying for jobs now when they don't see things like pay ranges advertised on them. And I think the fourth thing that they're also looking for is a lot more flexibility. And we sometimes, I've spoken to HR directors who are saying that they will actually get some candidates, particularly Gen Z, saying to them, look, I'm willing to accept a lower salary if you give me the flexibility to be able to work from home, or only come in once a week. So are you seeing some of that as well? And what would you say on the transparency pieces? Does that create any difficulties for you?
I think transparency is important as a communication and a way of working. I think there are, in some ways, communication is never going to be enough in terms of what you do and how you do it. What works for one person is going to be different to what requires of another person. I think we open up communication channels to hear employee feedback, to answer questions, and I think that's really important. And so having the two-way dialogue is something that I think everyone would advocate, and I think we do quite well in our organization. For us, I think it is about finding balances for all of these things, because there's also some really interesting research around engagement of the workforce, and actually money is not something that engages people, it actually disengages people. And so it doesn't actually matter if you're paying people fairly. If an individual perceives that as unfairly, that's going to be demotivating for them.
Yeah.
And so you have to just try and find something that works for your organization. I think what's really important to recognize is that we're working in organizations that have never moved so quickly, that have never been as diverse, that have never had expectations from employees as high as they are. So not every organization is going to always get it right. So you just have to try some things, see what works, fail quickly, and move on from that if you need to. So I don't think the one size fits all in how you communicate, how you pay people, how you offer flexibility. Because again, as an organization, I agree, there's definitely, ever since COVID, a rise of expectations and flexibility. And we offer hybrid working, and we're very proud that we offer hybrid working. But for us, it's also really important that we have still the majority, so 3 days for us, 60/40 presence in the office, because for us, that is an opportunity to build relationships. It's come out a little bit so far today, but teamwork is really, really important for us as a value, as a way of working, a way of ideating, learning from others. And I think especially at that early career stage, you learn through osmosis. You learn from,
Mm.
dare I say it, those water cooler moments where you learn from other people. We know that as a way of working, and learning, yes, you learn on the job, but at least 20% of that is learning from other people. And if you're wholly remote, if you're not having opportunities to ask questions, but more importantly, just hear other people, listen to the conversations around you, I really believe that's going to impact people's ability to learn. So for us, we came out very quickly in COVID to have a proposition that we committed to around hybrid working. But at the same time, it was very much still saying, but we value our time in the office together because that's a really important way to learn. So again, I think in that hiring meetings, in those interviews, it's a two-way process. So if a particular candidate is saying that they want to be fully remote, we'll have a very honest conversation and say that is not how we work and how we want to
Mm.
work. So it's opting in on both sides. An interview should be a two-way process. So again, you just need to be really, really honest in those conversations around what's important to the organization. And ideally, you're asking the right questions with the right answers to assess if that's a right fit or not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point around transparency, like you said. And what we're seeing, most organizations are doing the 3 days in the office. We
Mm.
ran a survey, and that was the most common response. And I think, like you said, it's really important, early on in the career to be around people to learn through that. You made a really good point around pay earlier as well, because it's like you said, the research actually says that the perception of fairness is more important than what we pay people.
Yes.
So it's making sure we build that trust with employees, that they're being paid. And like you said, pay doesn't really motivate people, right? It attracts you to an organization, but I always think pay is not a motivating factor, but it can definitely be demotivating.
Absolutely.
So it's it sounds like, from what you're saying, um, my wife is a engineer, so I'm gonna get her to apply for a job with diversity numbers as well. Um, if you could give one tip to HR leaders based on your experience of working, um, in the renewable energy sector, or just around how you build and embedded values, what is that one tip that you would give?
I think HR have a lot of advice and have a very important job, so I'm sure they don't necessarily need my advice, but I think just owning who you are, that authenticity. I think we talk a lot in HR around authentic leadership, and in HR we are both a leader but a role model, and we're a role model to our leaders and we're a role model to employees more broadly. So I think there are in some ways a weightier expectation equally on us that we are showing up as ourselves, that we are not afraid to, like we talked about before, to fail, that we own our strengths. We talk about the fact that we are not perfect, we have development areas as well. So for me, I think just really leaning into authentic leadership, I think is probably the best thing I could advise, because I think that also makes the job easier. If we are able to show up as ourselves, we can do our best work. It should mean that the work is more enjoyable.
Great advice. And I think anyone who wants to connect with you, what we're going to do is share your LinkedIn
Mhm.
details. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you the question, or I ask all my guests, which is, what is your favorite film and why?
I did just say I'll be authentic and honest, didn't I? So I have to own this one. So I need to admit it's a Disney film. So it's The Lion King. And it's a really emotionally charged film for me because it was the first film that made me cry. Obviously, it has really important themes of family, which is always emotional, um, relationships, the importance of responsibility, actually, and failure as well. But if nothing else, the songs are just iconic. And I would say, if anyone hasn't seen The Lion King in the theatres, it really is a fantastic show. So I would recommend that.
Oh, okay, great. And I always like it when, the favorite film is linked back to some of the lessons and the topics that we've been discussing. Um, I did actually go. So we went to see The Lion King last year, I think, in the theater. And yeah, you're right. It is a very good show. So
Yeah.
definitely recommend people go and see that. So thanks again, Rebecca, for all of your insights and advice and tips for our listeners. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again on the next episode of A Case of the Mondays.
Thank you.
Enjoy this episode? Join the Academy for free and have access to CPD certified reward training, quarterly reward community sessions, first access to salary insights reports, reward and benefits market data, and hundreds of free practical tools and templates.